Welcome back to the channel. My name's Adam Smith, and inside this GameFound preview series, we are continuing our adventure in Lands of Evershade from Awaken Realms. This one's landing on GameFound in mid-November. The exact date of the launch and the campaign link can be found in the pinned comment and video description. We're going to pick things up exactly where we left it off in part number 1, so if you haven't checked that out yet, I highly recommend you check that out first to understand how we got to where we're currently at, and also the prototype unboxing to show you all the components that came as part of the prototype, which may or may not show up during gameplay. Those that have already watched the prior video in part number 1 understand exactly how we got into this combat in the streets of Nightbloom Crossing. Ralgar and Riva are up against some mudlings and the mysterious murderer. And for those that haven't checked out part number 1, or as a refresher for the rest of you, let's re-listen to entry number 70 that led us to this combat.
Seeing the murderer just in front, you double your efforts. Anger gives you more strength than golden strands of divinum give him. Soon, you leap at his back. You both tumble to the ground, ploughing through muck and straw that covers the town's streets. When you come to a rest, he kicks you away and jumps to his feet. Then he looks at his dirty hands and says, "You'll regret this, pest. I'll teach you not to challenge your betters." As you stand up to meet him, he extends his hands towards the ground. A short command rings in your ears like a word of the gods themselves. At his call, the ground rises, spewing out crooked shapes made of straw, muck, wooden boards, and golden, glistening divinum. They rush toward you, while the murderer stands back, starting to weave another spell. He truly is a powerful wielder. Now that you see him better, something in the look of his slender, harsh face seems familiar. But you have no time to ponder this now, as you prepare to face him, and his constructs that seem to be leaking hastily bonded divinum. There's a lot of raw power now spread around the area. Maybe you could use it to even out the chances. With most of your equipment left behind in the House of Healing, you need every advantage you can get.
Combat in Lands of Evershade is a fast-paced engagement that takes place on a tactical sheet with a movement grid, which you can see clearly right here. We're going to head now into activations and turns and learn how these work within combat. Combat is played in turns, and each turn I'm going to draw an activation token from the initiative bag. And as you remember from the end of part number 1, we placed, based on this combat, 2 black activation tokens, 2 white activation tokens, and 2 which share each of the colors. With the activation tokens back in the bag, those tokens, when they're drawn, are going to determine whether a character or enemy is going to activate next. This will continue until each character becomes activated once. Then, if any enemies are not activated at least once, they get to act. After that, the turn ends and all activation tokens go right back in the initiative bag. Let's go ahead and start our very first combat turn. We'll grab one of those activation tokens out of the bag. The first activation token out of the bag is a white one, which means we can choose which of our characters goes first. I'm going to have Riva start us off. She's got the purple base on her miniature. When a character activates, it gets 2 actions to spend, but before we dive into that, the first thing to remember on activation of a character is that your action and reaction cards all refresh. Now, something that isn't clearly visible right now is on the back side of some of these actions and reactions over here. If I choose to use one and I flip it over on the opposite side, you're going to actually find at times various refresh restrictions on the back side. So you won't always be able to refresh every card. Some will have some criteria around it. So here's an example of the command card on the opposite side. It states, do not refresh this card at the start of your activation. You have to pay a fate to refresh this card. So with 2 actions to spend for Riva, what type of actions can we take? Well, we could take an action from the hotbar, which is over here. We could potentially take a basic action, which you actually see at the very bottom of the combat overview card. You'll see there are 2 of them. One is for moving and one is for first aid. We'll definitely touch on these as we go through combat. And the other one can actually appear as a special action as part of the sheet you're actually on. These special actions are known as arena actions, so they're tied directly to the sheet that you're currently on in combat. In this case, it's called Divinium Blast. It has the aura or the range in the top right-hand corner in terms of the area of effect. It also tells us that it's a spell based on the keyword. It's Divinium tied, and it also says once per activation, tells us exactly what we need to roll and the outcomes of that roll. However, for my very first action, I'm going to choose to have Riva move, and you'll see that as a basic action as we talked about in the bottom left of this combat overview. You also have the full combat overview on a reference card that you can keep an eye on as you go through for the first handful of times to become accustomed with combat, and then after that, you'll have this in your mind as second nature. This one here says use 1 action to move a number of spaces up to your move value. We take a look at Riva, and you can see the move attribute right here telling us we can move up to 6 spaces. Ralgar, our other character, only has a movement of 4, but is much stronger than Riva. With up to 6 movement to spend for Riva, she's got lots of options here in terms of where she could potentially place herself, but a couple things to note in terms of what she cannot do when doing movement. The first thing is she cannot move diagonally. She has to move orthogonally, so north, south, east, west type of movement. We can't go through any impassable spaces. These are marked with the double orange lines. You'll see them bordered. The square outline of the entire combat area, for instance, is an impassable space. You'll also see a couple marked inside as well, so we can't go through those, and we also can't go through an enemy. But you can absolutely move through other characters in your party or companions you may have, but you cannot, of course, stop on a single space with an enemy, companion, or another character. Now, the reason that I mentioned single spaces is because this particular combat has just single space locations. In other words, wherever you move your miniature, there's no room in that square for any other miniature to reside. But in future secret sheets that you'll see as you go through combat, you will see the arrangement of these combats definitely changing. They're not going to just stay like this. This is just one of the very first ones you're going to run into as you go through the game. They're going to start becoming more varied, and they will have different rules accompanying them for different things you will find throughout their layouts. Riva's going to use 3 of her 6 movement to move 2 spaces to the east and 1 space north to be adjacent to a muddling. It's worth highlighting the fact that you cannot take a move action, use some of your movement, not all of it, then take an attack action, and then use the rest of the movement you didn't use from your first move action. You cannot go back, you cannot break that move action in half and put some action in between. So it's one action at a time. So we did our move, we're all done there. Now we have a second action to spend, and we're definitely going to attack. Now, as the game progresses, characters will definitely be able to learn many offensive maneuvers and powerful spells, but in this very first combat, you're limited to just 2 ways of causing damage: a basic attack action card that every character has, and that special Divinium Blast action you can see right on the sheet itself. Now, as soon as I realized the fact that I don't even have a basic attack action in this area, I realized I'd done something incorrect. So I took a look inside of the prototype box cards for my character and realized I left out one of the B entry cards that should have been in this area. No gameplay effect to this point, thankfully, because I caught this. But this is the attack card which every single character in the game will have. Ralgar already has this one in there, but now Riva does as well. So you can see the setup for it at the very beginning of the game was to have all B action cards in the slots. So now we're all set up correctly. Just missed that. We're going to do this basic attack right now. Now, as we go ahead and do a basic attack, we have to check for requirements. You'll see at the very top of the card, it says it requires melee, which we do have. So as long as we have that keyword on our character, we are okay. So we have an improvised weapon, again, as part of choices we made inside of part number 1. Otherwise, we might have actually had a legitimate weapon in here, but we can still make do with this improvised one. Next, it tells us in the top right-hand corner exactly how to use this. So we have to be orthogonally adjacent, range 1 away from the enemy. So we've got the enemy in the north position, so we're good there. And then we're going to roll for our strength, which is not very good for Riva, but you'll see an icon right beside the strength, and that ties to something with the enemy cards. Each of the enemy cards that you go up against will have their health on the left-hand side. Sometimes it'll just be a numerical value, very easy to understand. Other times it'll be something for a boss or a more special character that you might have to do a little bit of math for. In this case, it tells us based on the number of people in our party, which is 2, we times that by 4, which is 8, and then we add 6 to it, letting us know we have a total of 14 health from the Mysterious Murderer, but thanks to decisions we made in the story from part number 1, we actually have 5 damage on this Mysterious Murderer already. So a little bit of a lag up, but we're still using improvised weapons, which aren't so great. But what I want to show you here is this icon that we just saw for the strength roll is right here on the enemy. So when we want to determine exactly what we're rolling when we're making an attack, we just take a simple look at the card itself for the enemy we're attacking, and we'll see it's a 6. So that's what we need to meet for our strength roll. So for our basic attack using our strength, it's only going to be 1d12 this time around. Not that great, but I do have a fate token to use if I want to re-roll the die. I also have the ability to take reaction cards and use them from supporting characters nearby in my party. So in other words, after I make this roll, I could choose to have Ralgar actually use Combat Insight, which is one of the support reactions that he has for an ally in any space around him. During a roll, I can support with a die. So basically, I can get somebody to help me out. Of course, once I use it, I would flip that over. So we're gonna go ahead and roll the dice, see if we get what we need right off the hop. That's what I'm hoping for. We'll see what we get. We got a 10. That is far beyond 6. Of course, it has to meet the strength check or be above it. We got it. That's gonna do a single point of damage as there was no armor on this enemy. If there was armor, we'd reduce the armor away from how many successful hits we have. We have a total of 1 successful hit. That does the damage necessary to take out this first muddling. So Riva takes one solid swipe and rips right through the muddling, taking it down and leaving Ralgar a little bit surprised at how much combat prowess she has. One last muddling to deal with on the game board. Let's talk about a situation where I actually had a weapon that was a little bit beyond what the improvised weapon was all about. Let's say instead that Riva actually had a sword equipped when she made that basic attack, so she would roll like I did, and when successful, she got one hit or damage. Essentially, it's damage within the game, but I'll continue to use hit and damage interchangeably. This sword would actually provide an additional 2 damage, so it would be 3 damage. And of course, when there's no defense or no armor on the enemies, that's going straight through to their health, which is going to do some serious damage. But if they actually have some armor, of course, the armor is going to chip away at that. With their second action out of the way, that's going to do it for Riva, and we also can't forget to flip over an action, reaction, or support card that we used. In this case, we used an action card, so we flipped it to the opposite side. You'll see there's no criteria on the opposite side, so the next time that Riva activates, it's going to refresh at the start of the activation. In the initiative bag, pulling out a token, we got ourselves an enemy activation token. When activating an enemy, you take a look at the row of enemies, starting with the left-hand side, and place the activation token on the furthest left enemy that has not got a token on it already. When the card Muddlings activates, all the Muddlings in the game are going to activate, and the activation card below flips over, the top one of that deck, if there is a deck. In this case, it's a single card, but the Mysterious Murderer has more than one card. Not a ton, but as you progress further into the game, there'll certainly be more activation cards for tougher enemies. So we now read the activation card from top to bottom, doing the very first part. In this case, it's going to be moving all the muddlings. So we're moving each muddling up to 2 spaces toward the nearest character, starting with the muddling with the lowest number on its base. Now, as you can see, we have some new bases on these miniatures just to help visualize and distinguish which one is which. So when we're moving them, you know exactly which ones I'm moving at all times. Now, technically, the other one that got killed off would have been C. These are prototype. In the final version of the game, there'll likely be a really good way of these being numerical. But as of right now, this works perfectly. So we're going to be starting with A and moving it 2 spaces to the nearest character. Ralgar is the nearest character, but good news for me is that this muddling moves too, and it's not going to be able to engage with me because just like the characters, it cannot use diagonal movement in any way, shape, or form, so it has to move orthogonally to get to me. Unfortunately, the second one is going to move too and be adjacent to me and be able to throw its attack at me. For the second part of the card, Muddling A does nothing. Muddling B is going to strike an adjacent character of my choice for 3 damage. The difficulty of the attack is 6. There's 3 potential damage coming our way. Let's find out if the attack even lands. The Muddling is going to go ahead and attack, looking for a 6 or higher. It got a 10, so it is going to do 3 damage, but now we can choose to use reactions if we wish. Reactions can be used at any moment during combat. You get to choose 1 reaction, so you can take a look at them and see defensive reaction here. So we can take a look and choose between dodge or exceptional endurance. The defensive reaction of dodge is a pretty good one. You get to roll for agility. It's 2 for Ralgar, and it would be minus a die if he actually had any armor equipped. He does not, so he gets to roll both D12s. He's looking for at least 1 success. There's a very tiny 1+ in that check mark. That's how you know how many successes. And we can prevent 3 damage if we actually nail this. So here we go. Let's see if we can pull this off. And we got it. We needed a 6. Again, the icon beside the agility ties back to the actual enemy that we're going up against for the check, which is a 6 or higher. We got it right on the nose with this one here. We only need 1, so we prevent 3 damage, meaning nothing gets through. The dodge defensive reaction flips over at this point, and there's nothing on the back of it, which means it'll be very easy to refresh the next time this character activates. Moving on to the next activation, we pull another token from the bag, and it's another black one, which means the Mysterious Murderer is going to be activating. Now, the Mysterious Murderer has 2 cards in its activation deck, but we just resolve the very top card first, so we flip that over and start from the very top of the card. The first thing to resolve is fallback. The enemy's going to move 2 spaces away from the closest character. We get to decide the path of the murderer, but standard movement restrictions apply, of course. In this case, the murderer is obviously closer to Ralgar, so an easy move of 2 spaces further to the west, getting further away from really all the characters in this situation. Now, if several characters were the same exact distance away from the murderer, then you can just decide which one of them is closest for the purpose of the move. The fallback instruction only takes into account which character is closest at the start of the move. This means that sometimes running from one character can move the murderer closer to another. Now the Mysterious Murderer is going to target the closest character. It's not going to ever target an adjacent space. As you can see from the prior step falling back, it's always going to move 2 spaces away from the nearest character. So in other words, if characters are adjacent to this enemy, there's no valid targets for its attack. So he's going to try and strike the closest target for half the party, which you can see from the party icon cut in half color-wise, which basically in my case of a party of 2 means 1 plus 1. So 2 damage is what he's throwing at us. The difficulty level of the attack is 7. The Mysterious Murderer is throwing a Powerbolt spell from range at Ralgar as the closest character, rolling a die to see whether it hits, and it does. Now, I'll have to check at a later date as to whether or not a critical success for the enemy attack actually means more pain coming my way. Maybe it gives an additional damage into the fray. Maybe it doubles the amount of damage coming at me. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to play it as 1 additional damage at least. So we got 2 coming at us. The critical success gives 3. We have 3 to defend. So we're going to take a look and use our defensive reaction here for Ralgar, Exceptional Endurance. Ralgar's got 4 d12s to roll, which is going to be great, but the downside here is that the check value for strength on this roll, coming from the Mysterious Murderer card, which is out of the shot currently, is a 9, which means it's going to be quite tough. But for every success we get, we can prevent 1 damage. Let's go ahead and see if we can do a decent job of trying to block the 3 damage coming our way. Hopefully we can get the 3 successes we need, but that would need some serious rolling to occur. The critical success was pretty awesome. We get 2 successes from that, so that's 2 defense against the 3 coming at us. So we have 1 coming through, but I'm not going to let that happen. We're going to use 1 of the fate of the 2 fate that I have for Ralgar. We're going to go ahead and re-roll these 3 dice, and we're going to hope to see another success come through. We got ourselves, yep, we got exactly what we needed there. We got 1 here, 2 there. We got everything to negate that entire attack. Exceptional Endurance indeed, and as we flip that card over to the opposite side, you'll see that when this character activates in the future, it will be able to replenish these as well with any restrictions, but you can see now I don't have any more defensive reactions. Now let's quickly touch on cover, which is something that did not actually come into play when the Mysterious Murderer made its Powerbolt attack against Ralgar, but let's say positionally, Ralgar was in a different space when that attack occurred. Characters and enemies can use terrain in combat to gain cover and protect themselves better against the attacks and other hostile effects. Cover provides characters with an additional die for all reaction rolls against enemy effects. On the other hand, when performing any roll that targets a covered enemy, characters use 1 less die. So how do you know if a model has cover? Well, if it's in a space with at least 1 impassable border. So now moving Ralgar over to the left, he's now got on the left-hand side an impassable border. And if you were to make a line dividing the board in half, top to bottom, he actually has cover as that invisible line top to bottom separates the 2 models that would have been interacting with each other. So if the Mysterious Murderer had been shooting at Ralgar, which it did, but Ralgar was in this position against an impassable barrier, he'd actually have the advantage of cover during our defensive reaction roll, which is pretty awesome. So just to visualize this, Ralgar is sitting in a space, the impassable border is on the side of him going up and down, so we simply just draw a line top to bottom following that impassable border, and if the models are on opposite sides of that line, then my model is in cover. I'm actually a big time fan of this cover system. I really think it makes things easy. So another example would be, let's say hypothetically Ralgar is actually sitting over here. Well, then the line would be drawn this way instead, which would still put Ralgar on one side of the board and the enemy on the other, so I'd still have cover. In this example, Ralgar has an impassable barrier on the left side and the right side, but no matter which one I use to draw that invisible line in a vertical fashion, the enemy model is going to be in the same section of the game board with me, which means it's not going to provide any cover. So long story short, another cool layer to add into the mix when you're making your movement decisions. Not only on the offensive side of the equation do you have to be thinking about how you're going to land attacks and make sure that you're able to pull those off, but also on the defensive side of the equation, you're probably going to want to make use of cover to get that additional die during defensive reactions. So I've covered a number of aspects outside the combat flow. Let's get right back into the flow of things here with the Mysterious Murderer who is going through the 3 steps. Now at the summoning spell, it says to spawn a muddling in an empty triangle space closest to the murderer. Not overly a big fan of that, as the closest space to the murderer at the moment is going to be right here. Well, so much for the muddling staying off our back. It looks like as long as the Mysterious Murderer is around, these muddlings will keep popping up. The Mysterious Murderer's turn is now done. The card that was face up is now face down at the bottom of the deck. There's 2 cards in the deck, so whatever's on the very top, we'll find out in the future. One thing worth mentioning is that if a muddling is to spawn on a triangle space, but all of them are covered by models, then no muddling would spawn. At this point, both the enemies have gone and Riva has gone. We pull another activation token out of the bag, and this time it is one of those dual tokens. It's black and white. So depending on the situation or the timing of when this token comes out, different things will happen. So in this case, what happens is whatever the previous token was, you do the opposite with this one. So the last one that came in the bag was a black token. So this token then becomes a white token. So Ralgar is going to go ahead. And as Ralgar is the last to activate in this round, he's going to be going anyway. So we're not going to go ahead and refresh all of his action, reaction, and support cards that don't have any restriction requirements. So he's got his dodge and exceptional endurance back, and only wish that I actually had an additional fate token. I have one sitting in my inventory. If I had two, I could actually push to do 3 actions with this turn this time. Would have been a nice time to do so. The one note around the initiative bag that you should always be aware of is that if the characters have both activated, in other words, during one of the combat rounds, you actually have a white token on all of your characters, but there are still enemies to activate. At that point, stop drawing from the initiative bag and simply move left to right across the row of enemies until you've completed all activations. Ralgar is ready to use his very first action. He's going to choose to attack the enemy that's sitting right in front of him to the north for a basic attack. As I'm targeting the muddling, which is right in front of me, it's going to be a 6 or higher on the die in order to be a success. And I've got 4 dice because I've got strength of 4. Now I could also have Riva support this roll and add 2 more dice into the fray, but it's just going to be mass overkill, I think. So I'll hold off on that card for support for the next action. So we're going to go ahead and roll right now for these 4. This attack against the muddling in front of us, see how we do. It looks like Ralgar could have used lots of support from Riva. That's a horrible roll, everything landing underneath the threshold for success. Now, the only positive in this is that if I fail the roll right now by choosing to stop right here, there's no negative effect here at the very bottom underneath the success of the basic attack. So there's no X saying that if you fail the roll, there's something bad happening. So that's good, but I don't like this because it's a wasted action. So I'm going to go ahead and use a fate right now to reroll all these dice. All I need is just 1 success because 1 damage is all it takes to take down this muddling. So come on, just 6 or higher. That's all I need, and I got it. My improvised weapon takes out the muddling right in front of me and also flipping over the basic attack card. For my second action, I'm going to choose to use the arena action. The Divinium Blast allows me to use this once per activation, so we're safe there. It is a spell. It can hit 1 from any range. I'm rolling it for my intelligence as well as my Divinium dice, and then depending on how things go, we've got 2 potential outcomes here. Ralgar's Divinium Blast is going to target the Mysterious Murderer, so in this case, the check for intelligence is going to be at a 9 or higher on D12. So again, with just 2 dice for the intelligence, not very good odds. I'm going to land successes on both of those dice. So what I'm going to do is use a offensive support card from Riva, this one here called Crucial Combat Insight, and it says, during a roll, support with 2 D12 dice. I flipped over that support card on Riva's board. I'm rolling 4 D12s, hoping for at least 2 of them to be successful at a 9 or higher, and I've got the div die here to roll as well, because if I get damage, then I get to determine how much damage, and the div die will help out with that. Let's see how we do. Well, that was a crazy good roll, but a really bad Divinium die roll. We got a 12 for 2 successes, another success, another success, another success. So that's going to be a total of 5, which is way more than the 2 we need for the successful path. Now, the actual Divinium Blast card states you get to deal 1 plus your Divinium die in value to the enemy. So it's going to be 2 damage. I wish it had been higher. The Mysterious Murderer has 5 damage on it, with 2 extra damage from the Divinium Blast is going to go up to 7. It has a total of 14 health. We're halfway there. At this point, because all characters and enemies have tokens on them, we've activated every single one of them. We can return all those back to the initiative bag, mix them up, and draw a new token to start the next turn. And the first token out of the bag is a white one, which is good news for us, meaning we can choose one of our characters to activate first. I'm going to choose to activate Riva first, so she's going to refresh all the cards which are face down and don't have any requirements for them to be refreshed. For my first action, I'm going to choose to take a support action called Command. This support action is going to tell me to roll my Charisma, looking for an 8 or higher. I've got 3 Charisma, so I have 3 D12s going into this roll. I get a +1 die, a plus D12 if I have the leadership keyword, and I do underneath Paladin over here, so now I have an additional D12. Now let's go ahead with the roll and see whether I can get 8 or higher on a number of these dice. The more, the better, because I get white initiative tokens added into the bag, which should be very nice. A great roll. I got 3 command tokens, all white, going into the bag. Again, you can only ever actually activate each character once per combat turn, but this just increases the odds that my characters get to go first at the very beginning, which is huge. You might think that's pretty powerful, although I did have a really good roll there, but when the card flips over after use, it says do not refresh this card at the start of your activation. You have to pay a fate to refresh the card. Moving on to my second action, I'm going to do Divinium Blast again, one target in any range. So I'm going to choose again to do a blast against the enemy way in the very back, and it's going to be a roll for intelligence, which is a 3. I'm going to flip over a support card called Combat Insight from Ralgar, which is going to give me a support die, an additional one, so that's being flipped over. So we got 4 D12s going into this roll, and we have the div die, so we'll go ahead and grab that D4 and make the roll and see how we do. Not bad at all. No complaints here. We got a critical success, counting for 2 successes, and another success, which is 3, which is higher than the 2+ needed in order to deal some damage. 1 damage plus 2 from the div die is going to be 3 thrown at the Mysterious Murderer. I'm making quite an aggressive push here with the command, hopefully allowing Ralgar to get the advantage and be able to activate right after Riva here, but we've gone up to 10 damage now on the Mysterious Murderer. All right, we got the initiative bank right here. We're going to draw one out. Let's find out what happens. We got ourselves a white. Ralgar is excited to get a jump on the enemies and is now going to go ahead and refresh the cards in the hotbar. My first action for Ralgar is going to be to move, as our objective of this battle in the top left-hand corner behind the Mysterious Murderer states to defeat the Mysterious Murderer. So even though these single enemies are sitting around here with a single damage on them, and I can just take them out as I go, I'd rather focus all of my attacks in this particular battle on the Mysterious Murderer. Ralgar's second action is going to be a Divinium Blast. We're going to go ahead and use a support card from Riva, the one we just refreshed moments ago. Crucial Combat Insight, giving 2 support dice to this intelligence roll. So we're going to have 2 more D12s going into it, so a total of 4. And we're going to have the div die as well. I'm really hoping we actually land the 4 because that would be an incredible kill if we can pull it off. Of course, we need the 2 successes or more first, and we have no fate on Ralgar, so no rerolls here. You have got to be kidding me. That is insane. We got a critical success, a regular success, because we need 9 or higher. So we have 3 successes when we only need 2 or more to put damage on this enemy. We already have 1 that comes from the attack itself when it's successful, plus 4 from the div die. That's a total of 5 damage going against this Mysterious Murderer. It has been taken down. It seems like for this intro battle into combat, going right after the Mysterious Murderer was definitely the right decision. Now, even though we took out the murderer and we're going to go to an entry to find out what happens next in the story, I do want to show you the second activation card that you never got a chance to see because, well, I put some strategy together there to push for a victory and, well, the dice were really kind to me in that roll, so we got it. But here's a look at the other activation card we didn't see from the Mysterious Murderer. This card also has a fallback, but it's 4 movement. I believe the other one was 2. It has a magical bolt. It has a different targeting setup going on, and then it still has that summon. What's really cool about that magic bolt targeting the moon icon is that for that situation, you actually take a look at the character's hotbars and find the one who has the most amount of that icon showing. So while in the other activation card, it was just the nearest character, this one changes it up because you have to take a look at the hotbar for both characters and take a look wherever you see the moon icon, counting them all up. And it includes not only the cards in the hotbar face up, but also cards that could be face down. In this case, for Ralgar, he's got 2. And over here for Riva, she's got 2 on the dodge, but also 1 over here on this flipped over card. So Riva would have been the target of this activation card had it had a chance to actually come through. You'll also notice besides the moon icon, there's also that blast icon as well. So that can actually be called upon through game effects and can show up as well on cards that are flipped over. So again, different ways for the enemies to potentially target characters and will certainly make the surprise element of who they target quite interesting. So what are the loss conditions of a combat? Well, it all comes down to your party becoming disabled. That can happen in 2 different ways. One is, of course, the obvious, where your HP actually drops all the way down to 0. We did a good job defending, and you'll always want to use defensive reactions to try to avoid your HP from taking hits, but at some point you're going to be going up against enemies, or maybe a number of enemies, that are going to start doling out hits beyond what your defensive reactions can potentially handle, and the strategy will increase like crazy. Now, on top of actually going south from the HP side of the equation, terror is another way that things can go south on you. As an example of one of the game effects that we could have actually had happen during our combat that results in terror, this one right here, the fail condition of a roll on Divinium Blast. I was able to actually avoid that, but if it had happened, we would have gained a terror on the character doing the Divinium Blast. Characters' dashboards have an aura section, which you can see here has 4 slots, and if there is a terror token in each one of these slots gained through game effects, that is another disabled character in your party. So now you know to avoid having your HP get down to 0 or have your aura area get filled up with terror. Now on the HP side of the equation, if you go down to 0 HP, you also gain an injury condition. And those injury tokens are representing more serious lingering wounds that you have to take care of. For example, you can do it in a camp or by visiting a healer, but if you ever have 3 injury tokens in the condition slots of a character board, they die. At that point, there's a number of steps that happen specific to a character dying in the party. If this situation occurs where someone dies inside of your party, then all of the characters are going to gain a terror, and you're going to be sharing the dead character's items, gold, and also finding a new character to hold on to the companion or companions. The dead character and all tokens and markers go right back to the game box. The rest of the party continues the game. From now on, the purpose of any effects that count the number of characters only count the remaining that are actually in play. In the meantime, while the party continues, or if you're playing solo, before you continue, you can now go ahead and create a brand new character from the very start, following either the player's handbook, or you can take a pre-generated character to get right back into the action. The new character starts with a number of advancement tokens lowered by 1 than the least advanced existing character. Then the new character joins the party at the start of the next rest phase, and of course in the very rare case, and it's potentially possible that all characters die before the camp sheet resolves, your adventure is unfortunately over. You reset your game, create new characters, and start over. Now, it is worth mentioning that in a combat situation where, let's say, hypothetically you have a party of 2 and one of your characters gets eliminated because of terror or because HP is reduced to 0, they're actually represented by a token on the game board and can potentially actually have their health increase or potentially reduce terror through game effects, which may allow them to actually come back. So the effect token of where the character died sits on the board. It doesn't take up any space, but it can still be affected by ally effects. So it is possible you could be eliminated or defeated during combat, and then an ally can actually get you back up on your feet, and then you can continue in the current round by activating if you haven't already. Last but not least, it is worth mentioning this aura section here can actually be populated with boons. These are one-time bonuses to each of your 4 basic attributes that you gain as a result of blessings, inspiration, or other positive auras or effects that might come through gameplay. So it's not all bad for that aura section. So as an example, here is a +1 charisma, which you might gain through some game effect as you're going through the story or through combat. And once it's in your aura section, the next time you have to make a roll using that attribute, charisma in this case, you can choose to discard this token, this boon token from the aura area in order to add 1 die in this case. With those additional thoughts out of the way, let's find out what happens when we get a victory in the streets of Nightbloom Crossing.
Your strike brings the murderer to his knees. With his control cut short, the mudlings collapse back into the muck. Weak and unable to utter a word, the man gestures at you, pleading for you to hold the final blow. While he tries to catch his breath, you notice a glint of something golden on his extended hand. A large ring with a family crest that looks vaguely familiar. You take the ring from his finger and look at it closely. Then you gaze at the face of the murderer. Suddenly, everything connects. You know this man. You've seen him in Whitewell. His name is Valerius Oldenbach, and he's one of the 7 patricians who rule the city together. There were rumours of power-hungry wielders stalking the land to gather more divinum, but you never expected it to be this bad. With your mind racing, it takes you a second too long to notice something's happening with Valerius. His body starts to glow and rise from the ground. The bonding is complete. He now has Inid's entire power at his disposal. You strike, but he's faster. A powerful force blasts you back, and before you can get back into the fight, Valerius is already far away, fleeing from town into the dark hills beyond faster than any man you've seen. A while later, you sit in a long hall among all the prominent people of the town. Once they hear your whole story, pure shock crosses their faces. They want justice, and your testimony, with the seal now in your possession, is good proof of Valerius's crime.
The game now tells me to gain Patrician Signet, and this has Brilliance and Artifact as keywords underneath of it. It also tells us to return everything going on here on this sheet, including sheet number 2 being returned back to the box, models all going away as well. We're going to refresh our action or reaction cards, and then if we have any improvised weapon item tokens, we discard them. With everything for sheet number 2 cleared away, as well as our improvised weapons loss, we now move to entry 80 in the storybook.
The discussion moves on to another troubling topic. Leorith is mortally injured. No one left in the entirety of Blackridge can stop the bleeding from her deep wound. The dressings and tourniquet can only keep her alive for so long. With Inid dead, Leoreth is now the strongest wielder of the province, even if she only has a shadow of her teacher's abilities. For this part of Evershade to thrive, she has to live, and the only people who could help her are the priests of Whitewell. Someone has to take Leoreth to the city. A group small enough to travel fast, but capable enough to deal with any dangers of the trail. A group that, once in Whitewell, could make a convincing case against Valerius. Who knows? Once he's tried and put to the sword, Leoreth may be able to claim back her teacher's divinum. This could bring Nightbloom Crossing into a new era of prosperity. All eyes fall on you, and after a short consideration, you agree to go. Why? What pushed you towards this decision?
We now have what seems to be an important choice in the story. It says, are you in it for justice and vengeance? Are you in it for good of Blackridge? Are you in it for personal power? I'm choosing the very first one. We're in it for justice and vengeance. We're going to 85.
The next day, you set onto a trail with a small one-horse cart that carries Leoreth and all your possessions. Nightbloom Crossing soon disappears behind, a bright flower in the dark vale. Far in front of you, a giant column of light falls from the skies. The same column that falls into the circular well in the centre of Whitewell, giving the city its name. You look at the cracked disk of Luada far above your head, where the light originates from. They say one day her shield will fail. One day, light will come and claim all. You say a simple prayer for the Moon Lady to guide you in your travels. Then you step forth onto the roads of Evershade.
I've marked Z in the story tracker, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of that tracker, and also it told me to discard sheet 1 with all markers, tokens, and models. Each character is going to gain 2 XP. I've gone ahead and given both of my characters 2 XP on their trackers, which you can see right here and over here, and now it tells us, congratulations, you've completed Act 1 of Chapter 1 of the adventure. That's going to do it for gameplay. Now, as you continue through the adventure of the game, you're also going to eventually run into the camp phase. So I'm going to quickly talk about that at a high level to give an idea as to what's involved with it. The camp sheet and resting is all tied together. Characters are going to rest on the camp sheet, a special type of secret sheet with holders on it for several camp cards. And whenever the game asks you to resolve a camp phase, you simply put the camp sheet in the available space of the story tracker and follow the procedure listed right on the camp sheet, which you can see at the very bottom here is the camp phase. And once the camp phase is complete, you just return to the same place that asked you to resolve the camp phase initially. So it could be an entry, a card, or a sheet, and you continue the game from there. So the camp phase here tells us that each character with an advancement token in their pouch may advance. For more information on advancing, the player's handbook has all the information around that, and of course that gets into more detail than I'll explain all in one video right here. Next up, each character refreshes their action cards and restores their HP. Each character may move equipment tokens between their pouch and character board or exchange them with other characters. Each character may move action cards between their hotbar and their pouch. So this is where you can actually start looking at the pouch for your character and pulling cards in and out, depending on maybe what worked and didn't work up to this point or what you might have gained to that point. Next, place each character on the campsite card in any order. Some cards only hold a certain number of characters. Then each character in any order resolves the campsite card they're placed on. Only characters on the same card can assist each other in rolls, and then discard all models and markers from the sheet, return the sheet to the box, and continue the game. You'll see here at the very beginning we have an improvised shine as the only one that's actually slotted in, but as you go through the campaign, this will fill out for sure. And that, my friends, wraps up the GameFound preview series for Lands of Evershade from Awaken Realms, landing on GameFound in mid-November. If you want to see the exact date as well as the campaign page link, I've got it in the pinned comment and video description. I'll have it on screen in the top right now as well. Really hope you enjoyed this series showing you how the game flows and operates, as well as all the components that came as part of the prototype, and hope this helps you make an informed decision on it when the campaign launches in the very near future. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll certainly respond to each and every comment as they come in. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.